So today I'm here to talk about 5 traits of an unhealthy ENFJ. So, number one, the biggest thing that you might find in these ENFJs is that they are often very impulsive. This is because they are not getting into their introverted intuition, which is their auxiliary or second function. And so that means that instead they're doing this thing we call looping, which is where their dominant and their tertiary function are pretty much going in and at each other, and they're only using their auxiliary function to kind of like feed that agenda that they already have rather than a very fully fleshed out fashion. So don't get this confused with maybe like an ESFP, for example, who has inferior introverted intuition. This ENFJ will still be using introverted intuition to an extent because we don't ever forego our auxiliary function completely. However, you'll see that their introverted intuition is not being nearly as fleshed out or mature, and the fact that they are maybe serving too many people. They are probably spreading themselves way too thin within their friend groups, within groups of work or whatever it might be, and they're rarely having any energy for themselves. They're saying yes to every single option that comes their way, or every single opportunity that may come their way, without giving thought into, okay, wait a minute, how much energy do I actually have for this thing? Okay, can I actually afford to be able to expend this much energy? Am I even able to help in this situation? And so a lot of times these ENFJs, because they do not allow themselves to think completely into the future of what might happen and check in with their energy levels, they might say yes to something and then later on find out that they probably shouldn't have, or they might even make a decision such as maybe like promiscuity, or getting drunk, or again saying yes to something that they probably did maybe should not have said yes to, or maybe even spilling some information that they probably should have thought about, like, wait, is this information I should be sharing, especially if it has to do with other people, or is this even safe to share with the person that I'm sharing it with, because ENFJs tend to hold a lot of information. And so all of these different things, and this lack of knowing how things are going to play out, or not thinking too much about it, but rather like allowing their introverted intuition maybe to load up to like, I don't know, like 40 to 50%, and then have this 50% gamble, like, yeah, it might go wrong, it might go right, rather than allowing a patience to be able to understand. So with these ENFJs, they definitely have to practice more patience. They have to practice more opportunity, being allowed to be and get within themselves, and understand, what the longer implications of whatever their actions might be, or whatever the implications of other people's actions might be, and then also find a way to be able to serve themselves in the same sphere. So the second trait that we're going to be talking about that can be found in an unhealthy ENFJ is passive aggressiveness. Now, this is because ENFJs having extroverted feeling as a dominant function. I like to often describe this function as knowing the exact buttons to push in the exact order to get an emotional reaction out of an individual or a group of people. So they're very in tune with the interpersonal, and even though they might have this natural talent for it, it's not always a skill if it's an ENFJ. So there is a difference between a talent and a skill. However, because of them still having that talent for this, then they may often not want to say what's really on their mind directly, because they might have this fear of conflict. So rather, they might throw what we call shade at people. They might say things very facetiously or very sarcastically, or just throw little quips here and there into conversation that'll have the person kind of like see on their radar, if they're paying enough attention, like, wait a minute, is so and so mad at me? Where's all of this coming from? Rather than going straight up to the person and just directing it, being like, hey, so honestly, this is what's bothering me, or this is what has been bothering me, or this is what I would like for us to resolve. And so a lot of times these ENFJs can be much less direct, and in fact, they do. It's kind of a fault of them. Number one, not asserting their boundaries in the beginning, so therefore not being able to have the if you want to call it, the confidence maybe to actually go to someone and tell them like, hey, actually what you did bothered me, or hey, I don't like what you're doing. Instead they allow it to build up and build up and build up, and then eventually they just start allowing that anger to kind of like leak out in, again, like very small quips and very strategic ways, because the ENFJ is very strategic. Even when they're in that impulsive stage, a lot of times there's still a method to the madness that they have. And in this way, it's allowing their TI inferior to kind of like get in little jabs and little paper cuts, if you will, on the person that they are trying to now attack. But as I said, the best way for an ENFJ to actually handle this, and to tell if they're like, matured, is if they are, instead of being passive aggressive and dropping all of these little hints, they are instead of coming up to the person, they're like, hey, honestly, what you did over here kind of bothered me, or hey, do you mind if you stop? Or something that even I've been practicing as an ENFJ, speaking for myself, is when somebody is doing something to me, whether they know that it's bothering me or not, I can just straight up tell them like, hey, you're provoking me. Can you please stop? Just let them know, like, hey, I don't like this. And from that point on, whatever they decide to do with that information, now it's on them, whatever that consequence might be. But I did not show a passive aggressive or subtle quip in that moment. Rather, I decided to be direct and straightforward and let the person know like, hey, this is kind of a warning. This is what's bothering me. Although I will say that sometimes ENFJs can be what may seem as passive aggressive, mainly because they want to save face for another person. And so don't get these two things confused. Sometimes an ENFJ may not want to go through all the trouble of like, bring this person into my office and have this whole talk about something that could just maybe, if you hint at it a little bit, like, hey, that kind of bothered me, with like a facial expression or kind of like a comment that you laugh about, but then the person kind of gets the message like, oh, okay, I think that I probably shouldn't say such comments anymore. Then that could also be resolved. But it's when you throw these kind of hints and the person's not getting it, that's when you now need to decide to go straight for, just being straightforward, or that's when ENFJ, who probably is less seasoned, will go for the more passive aggressive, because they've allowed it to build up too much. Number 3, this ENFJ often wants everybody to like them. Now there's a caveat here. See, most ENFJs want everybody to like them. That's true. Who doesn't really want everybody to like them? However, there's a difference between wanting everybody to like you and working very hard to try to get everybody to like you. So a healthy ENFJ or a matured ENFJ still cares about what other people think, and still cares enough to be able to be considerate of other people and wants to be well liked around other people. However, the matured and seasoned ENFJ understands that that's just simply impossible. Not like there unfortunately are just people who, if you are acting one way, then other people are still going to just hate you for the same exact things or the same exact reasons why other people love you. So there's no way that you can please everyone. And so at the end of the day, you should just only learn to kind of like please yourself, be happy with yourself, and the people who actually love you will continue to draw to you, and the people who don't love you, I guess it's their loss. But at the end of the day, you still pretty much appreciate who you are, and you still don't go out of your way to try to get people to dislike you. You're still being considerate of them. So that's what I would at least consider to be a healthy, matured, seasoned ENFJ. But the unhealthy ENFJ will consistently sacrifice who they are and consistently go out of their way to try to get people to like them, even if it may go against whatever their moral code might be, or even if it goes against whatever just the things that they even want to get involved in and do. This ENFJ will oftentimes go to these people and, just do all types of favors and pretty much sacrifice themselves on the behalf of these people. And a lot of times when this ENFJ is doing this like way too much and serving and serving and serving and doing all of these different acrobatics to try to get people to like them, it actually has a counteraction where people start to notice like, yo, you're trying too hard for all of us to like you, and that's actually making us not like you. And that can really be detrimental to the ENFJ and cause them to spiral, go into their inferior TI. Now they start to dislike themselves even more because now everybody else also dislikes them. And then before you know it, they start becoming very critical and once again, passive aggressive, to other people, because now they are having this whole crisis of, oh my goodness, everybody hates me, even when I try to get everybody to like me. All of these things that I did for them, all these ways that I tried to infiltrate these social circles and help all of these people and do this and do that, and I've been there for all of these people or whatever. Now they're kind of like victimizing themselves, and they're seeing themselves as not only the victim but somebody who has put out so much and yet still cannot be liked, and so therefore might even be unlovable, which in my opinion is way more prominent when it comes to ENFJ Enneagram 2s, but still a common ENFJ trait. It's just that maybe not every ENFJ might relate to this as frequently as maybe an ENFJ Enneagram 2 might. But yes, this is a big thing that I would say constitutes for an unhealthy ENFJ, and it's very popular within the type 2 because of that FE dominant, understanding the interpersonal dynamics, the social matrix, if you will, and how we're supposed to be treating each other. And so therefore wanting everybody who is within their social atmosphere to have a good view or a good light of them. And if they see that somebody doesn't like them, then they start to think a lot about, why doesn't this person like me? Why doesn't this person like me? How can I get this person to like me? Which oftentimes just won't work because it's not an organic liking. You're forcing the person to like you, which oftentimes causes the person to double down on why they don't like you. And so the best thing to do for ENFJs who are like this is, once again, just be yourself. Learn who you are and try to understand yourself on a deeper level, so that once you understand that, I always say that the same naked body that can arouse many people is also the same naked body that unfortunately can turn off so many people. And you just have to learn to love your body. Now, that doesn't mean that, of course, you get sloppy with it, of course. Go to the gym, metaphorically, work on yourself, continue to try to be better so that you can look into the mirror and be happy with who you are. And then if other people still like, well, that's on them. But as long as you're happy with who you are and you're taking care of yourself, that's all that matters. But don't try to live for other people's acceptance, because then you'll die from their rejection. A fourth way to be able to identify an unhealthy ENFJ is that they cannot think for themselves. Now, this is very popular when it comes to an FE dominant, because by the flip side of the coin of FE is introverted thinking. So introverted thinking is all about thinking for yourself, that regardless of whatever everybody else thinks, what do you think? What is the consistently logical, cohesive thing that you have in mind? Now, this doesn't mean that ENFJs never have this, but rather they don't think much about it a lot of times, or even when they do, they're afraid to share it because they know that if they do share the thoughts from their TI a lot of times, then because it might a lot of times also go against whatever the social norms are, then it could cause them to be ostracized. It could cause them to seem a little bit more weird and actually maybe even be canceled because of these thoughts. Because a lot of times, especially being an intuitive type, these are progressive thoughts that they might be having. And so it's like, you know what? I actually do believe that maybe monogamy might not be the right way to go all the time. But what? And then you have a whole society that's now thinking of, this thing or, whatever. And so instead of maybe saying a lot of these thoughts and trying to help people understand what they really think, they'll just kind of keep to themselves. The ENFJ will then sacrifice what they may truly think about a subject, or what they may truly think about, a certain concept, whatever it might be, and not really share those thoughts out of fear of being ostracized and pretty much not accepted by the tribe. But a healthy ENFJ will actually take a lot of time to be able to think, okay, what do I actually think versus what does the rest of society think? And then is this something that I should even share with society, regardless of the fear of them maybe ostracizing me, so that maybe I can help them progress forward? Or is there something that I should probably save for maybe my intimates to be able to talk with them about? And it's probably not very necessary to share with society anyway, but if people ask me or are close enough to me, then I can give them my thoughts and opinions on these matters. And not really care, once again, too much whether or not they will still accept me or not. Because now that ENFJ is valuing their TI, their own logic and consistent thinking, versus just completely trying to merge and be with the rest of the group on whatever they may be thinking. And the fifth and final tip that I'm going to be giving today on how to identify an unhealthy ENFJ is them being, in a way, manipulative, if you will. Now, we see this trait a lot with ENFJs, and I personally, I guess this is my own TI, I personally do not believe that manipulation in itself is inherently bad or wrong. However, it depends on how you are using it. Sometimes, or a lot of times, ENFJs are the types to go behind the scenes and operate things almost like, maybe like chess, a game of like social chess in a way, to kind of like get certain results for the group, or to be able to help everyone. And the reason why a lot of times it's done in a very covert or behind the scenes fashion is because ENFJs oftentimes have they have a hard time with being able to explain or articulate their plans, especially dealing very highly with introvert intuition as their auxiliary function. So because their plans are often very abstract and they're kind of just following the intuition in a way, then it's already hard enough to try to follow that intuition as a guide that's within themselves, let alone now having to explain it to everybody that may be involved. So rather, they might try to use a little bit of social puppeteering to be able to get the results that are not just for them, but for the benefit of everybody else. However, when you have an unhealthy ENFJ, then these are the ENFJs that are usually not being really considerate of what everybody thinks, but rather they're only thinking about what they can get from everybody else. And oftentimes they may even allow themselves to become delusional and think that it is what everybody else wants, when in actuality it's not really what everyone else wants. So even though I believe that Wanda from WandaVision is an INFP, the world that she constructed, for example, could be a great example of how an ENFJ might operate with people. Or even think of the other mother from Coraline, which actually in that movie, I do believe that she was an ENFJ, and she was making it seem as if this is what you want, this is what you want, when in actuality, it's only what she wanted. So a lot of times these ENFJs, when they're unhealthy, then they can be manipulating things and they can make you seem like, okay, yes, this is what you want, this is what you want, when in reality, it's only what they want, and now they're trying to make you believe that it's also what you want. And a lot of times it can work, a lot of times it doesn't really work. But for an healthy ENFJ, they will actually not only learn to be able to be upfront a lot of times, but they'll also try to be keen to what is actually best for everyone, not just catering to what people want, but actually what they need, which is the ENFJ's superpower, especially when they're seasoned and they're mature. They are actually tapped into what people may actually need and not just what they want, and they're able to find ways to provide that for them or to help the person to be able to find that for themselves. So these are 5 quick tips on how to identify an unhealthy ENFJ.